It is one of the biggest criminal investigations of an American corporation ever.
We're executing a search warrant.
In the past few months, hundreds of federal agents have raided at least 70 of Columbia's hospitals and offices in 7 states.
Rick Scott promised explosive growth to shareholders, but to insiders, Rick Scott could be ruthless.
They seem to care more about profits than medicine.
Good old-fashioned fraud, lying for money.
Welcome back to Why Are We Like This, the only true crime podcast that treats Florida like the active crime scene it is. I'm David Quinones. I'm joined, of course, as always, by Tomas Kennedy. Tomas, what's up, man?
Feeling good. You know, we're recording a late night emergency pod. It's just 10 p.m. on a Thursday, and the boys are back in town and potting away.
It's an emergency podcast. 14 years ago, a guy was elected governor, and we are just now getting around to now he's in the middle of his first Senate term. We're emergency.
He committed the largest case of Medicare fraud in U.S. history. Wow.
We're gonna get to that, but first, before he starts talking, my other co-host, Gerald Doherty. Jerry, what's up, man?
Gerald, before he starts talking Doherty, I'm doing okay.
So we got a little bit of an insight into what we're going to be talking about today. Today, we prepared a comprehensive case file on maybe the highest profile criminal occupying public office in our state. His role overseeing what has been called the largest Medicare fraud in history, how he's used his vast fortune, ill-gotten in many ways, to buy 3 statewide elections despite enjoying very little popular support, and his maybe just a little bit overly ambitious plan to run for president. So that's what's on slate, what's on tap, what we're going to get to. But a couple quick notes first before we start. You and I were talking a moment ago before we started recording about Matt Gaetz, completely vindicated, fully found innocent, right?
That's the thing. I remember where I was when James Comey said we're not pressing charges against Hillary Clinton for her email server. I dropped to one knee and I put my hand to my forehead and I said that I was worried that she might be guilty, but now that the Department of Justice is not pressing charges, I know that she's innocent and vindicated. And I remember when I looked up, there was Glenn Greenwald staring over me to say, "Don't you feel better?" And I say, "Yes, I do, Glenn." And that's how he is now. And he's just being consistent.
Yeah,
he's just being consistent. Yeah. He's challenging power by, I don't want us to get banned.
Tomas, did you infect your browser by going to rumble.com and watching the Glenn Greenwald interview with Matt Gaetz? It's just like, by the way, just a word jumble that I would not have put together in like 100 monkeys on typewriters. I couldn't have thought up that word jumble.
So I thought I was terminally online, and I am in a lot of ways, but this is the first time I'm hearing about this happening. Glenn Greenwald interviewed Matt Gaetz?
Yes, and I think that it was, okay, so it was under the, giving Glenn the tiniest bit of grace here. It was under the auspices of, I guess, Gaetz has clearly a very bad faith, few news cycles worth of war opposition, right, Jerry? This is like he's couching this in like opposition to Ukraine war. So Glenn is saying, I'm opposed to the Ukraine war.
Well, so his whole thing is, the deep state DOJ tries to conjure up like scandals on their political enemies, and that means having to go after Matt Gaetz for his relationship with, his name's Joel Greenberg. Am I remembering that correctly? Is the
fucking creep who prays an underage, like...
Yeah, that's the thing. Like,
we saw the... I don't give a shit about the DOJ. We saw the Venmo, like, payments, and he's a fucking weirdo.
Yeah, and the text messages, see if you can get name redacted to come hook up again next weekend. He
would apparently make like a game out of trying to see who could sleep with various people and off. Like, what was it? He had one woman who was called the Snitch, where if you went to bed with her, that was the end of the game or whatever.
Like Republican Senator John Kennedy said, I love the dialectic, and we can have a conversation about the Ukraine, but like, I really don't think the deep state conjured up Matt Gaetz's like pedophile scandal, like almost over a year ago, because of his like future opposition to the war in Ukraine. It just does not compute.
Also saw a pardon for it. if I remember correctly.
Right,
Yeah.
enough that him and his dad got blackmailed by
Yeah.
some weird fucking Tallahassee scumbag or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, was it the deep state that made Joel Greenberg like build some weird fucking mining facility in a public building? Do you guys remember that?
Maybe he's CIA. Maybe he was working Matt Gaetz to frame him.
Also-
You know, that's why he's in jail. That's why the CIA had to put him in jail to make it look real.
You know, I've been reading a lot of James Ellroy lately. So, like, you saying that, like, I kind of was like, yeah, you know what, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Also, fuck Glenn Greenwald. That guy makes me grumpy. Like, did you see today? They put out new guidelines in the Florida State Capitol that all demonstrations and events need to be approved by basically like state capitol administration, and they have to abide by the mission guidelines of the DeSantis administration. I mean,
So
like seriously,
speech codes, basically.
like I am not being like hyperbolic. But where is Glenn Greenwald, so-called libertarian defender of free speech in Florida?
Yeah.
I mean, like, like this guy's just a fucking loser who just loves being on Tucker Carlson, and he's like a little attention whore.
I'm trying to imagine the like
thousand. Why are we like this on Debate Us, you fucking coward?
There's the clip right there.
Clip this, tag his ass. Don't be a fucking pussy. Come on, Why Are We Like This on Debate Us. Don't be a fucking coward. Come.
Yes.
And we need to do a case file on Glenn Greenwald, because you got some shit on him, David.
Yeah. There's a lot to talk about with Glenn. And you know, I used to actually have pre-Tucker and but post Snowden, I used to have a pretty like kind of normal running collegial back and forth with him on Twitter. Like I used to.
I remember when I was in college studying journalism, he was like the man. Like he was like the guy you were aspiring to be.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He was but I had like the additional sort of context where I kind of kept him a little bit at arm's length. This isn't like one of those like trying to pretend that I knew that he was gonna, get high on the Tucker Carlson supply. But like I did remember his old blog posts from when I was in college, way before you, Jer. And like he had a blog that was pretty popular, but like not widely read. And this was like the like heyday of blogs. And he was pretty vehemently like anti-Mexican and like very anti-Latino and like, but he was all couched in the whole, we're going to lose our cultural, integrity, that whole thing, that whole like right-wing trope of like,
sounds just like white people.
You can't make more, the thing, the 1488 fucking Nazi shit where it's like, you can't make more of your people with other people's people or whatever, like race misogyny. He had like a lot of that shit going on, but it was the early aughts. So people were like less tuned into it, but I'm Puerto Rican. So I was like, that's kind of fucked up. And,
he was also, I mean, he's like a very anti-Muslim guy, and he was pro the war in Iraq.
Yeah.
Like he was pro the war on terror. I mean, the guy sucks. Glenn, don't be a coward. Come debate us.
Come debate these three
guys.
What
are we debating him on?
I don't know.
I guess we should say.
Debate something.
Yeah.
Whether or not it is good, actually, to burn your recycling. How about that, fellas? To just burn
your recycling?
Yeah, because thanks to the Doral trash recycling station that we have here in Florida.
This would be a stinky thing to do.
This is what we call a segue. We have our own airborne toxic event happening right down here, right in our own backyard. And I swear to fucking God, Tomas, I smelled it the other day before I even knew that it was fucking happening. I swear that I smelled it over here in my part of town, which is like a solid 6.5 miles from where this was. So
I mean, you're closer than I am.
Yeah, it's nasty. For those of you that don't know, down here in Miami, we have a huge, like, maybe we'll talk about this in a future episode a little bit more, but it's news I didn't want to like go without mentioning it. It's right adjacent to this huge, I've been chatting with you guys about this huge central park that they're building. That's also going to be the home for like government buildings and a bunch of other municipal infrastructure. Right next to it, literally across the street from it, is a trash sorting recycling plant that has been like the point of some controversy for like a while in Doral, which is basically Miami. For those of you that don't know, it's just like, it's like so Miami that they had to call it something different, and they called it Doral. And so yeah, it's dioxins just spewing into the air. This has been, I think they finally put it out, but it was going for about 7 days, this fire. And it's kind of fucked up, man. Everybody's like spending all these days and weeks talking about, oh, nobody's paying attention to East Palestine. And then we start paying attention to East Palestine. And now
Palestine, I think
Palestine, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, East Palestinian listeners.
Yeah.
And Palestinian listeners too.
Yeah.
Palestinian listeners too. And then now we have our own little fucking thing happening down here. And it's maddening because it feels like we won't really pay attention to it until, like, there was, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Old Smoky in Coconut Grove. But it was just literally the same thing. But they did it on purpose. It was like for 50 years and in the Grove. And then, we've talked about, like, in past episodes how, like, the predominant denizens of the Grove for so long were Black Bahamian families that had helped build Miami. And all of a sudden, a few years later, in, I think it was like the mid 90s, 10 or 15 years after it had been closed, some reporter started tracking down all the families and people that grew up there, and wouldn't you know it, over-index on every type of cancer that's associated with that kind of toxin. So we have that to look forward to.
And actually, I want to give a little bit of context around the incinerator and Doral, because Doral, 15 years ago was an industrial area of Miami, far out west, swampland, where it was mostly just, warehouses and places that sold tile and like construction supplies. And through, like the development wars in Miami, like the zoning wars, they started building like this, massive like residential gated communities, right? They started like moving people in there. It became a hub for like the Venezuelan, diaspora that was like coming here and investing.
Yeah. Little Caracas, yeah.
Yeah, and it became a place of just like awful urban planning, like communities, traffic,
strip malls, just like...
and this incinerator is something that they built, sort of like, like really bad urban planning. They basically zoned the area around it and created like a bunch of like residential like housing around it that was just not supposed to be around it, because it's like an actual health hazard.
Yeah.
Let alone just like a residential nuisance to be close to that much garbage, the smell, the toxins, blah, blah, blah. And there's like a nonprofit here called Florida Rising, and other community groups that have been fighting it for years now, trying to get this place shut down. But there is the reality that like, I think like 60% of the garbage of Miami-Dade County is burnt there or something like that.
Yeah.
Like a massive amount of our garbage is built there. So it's a really consequential facility.
Yeah.
But what happened? You know what I mean? Like there was an accident. Now the place went up in smoke. You know what I mean? We don't have where to burn our garbage. And the reality is that there's a massive amounts of homes there that like some are homeowners, and some people are saying, well, why would you buy a house so close to, an incinerator facility? Well, because you kind of do sometimes, right? And people don't know any better. But there's also a lot of people that rent there, that have efficiencies. So really, it's just a story of, I think, the massive overdevelopment, the irresponsible, horrible urban planning.
Yeah. No planning went into Doral. Doral is just a Sims program. Yeah.
Yeah, and just the complete lack of just like our public officials, our elected officials, and just having a cohesive city that makes sense, and literally, it's like it literally went up in smoke. What can you say about it?
Yeah, I mean, another part of this is like the fact that in Miami-Dade County we have 34 different municipalities, and some of them are pretty good sized, large sized, like Doral. Doral takes up a lot of space geographically, and there's a lot of density there. A lot of people live there. And then some of them are fucking pointless, like Gould's. Why the fuck is Gould's a municipality? Why is Virginia Gardens a fucking municipality? Yeah. Why is it its own city? Yeah. So
and you know what a lot of it is, not all of it, because some of them do make sense, right? But a lot of it is that the fact that elected officials in Miami-Dade County, in the city of Miami, at the school board, right? They lose their like elected position because they're termed out or whatever. And when they don't have a leg up to run for Congress, or they can't run for state senate or whatever, they literally create this.
Oh, it's like a make work program, basically.
Yes, they create this like
Damn.
little municipality so they can become the mayor of of Goulds. They could become the mayor. There was an effort to incorporate this area called Biscayne Gardens in the northern part of Miami-Dade County, solely as a job placement program for no-name elected officials. You know what I mean? The grift is incredible.
It's blossoming. It's blooming. All of these municipalities. They want to,
and that's why we have this podcast. Why are we like this? Why?
So how about this? How about this, guys? A little bit of potpourri. Let's pick, because one thing that we had to talk about here was the Florida Democrats. We just wanted to touch on each of these a little bit, but the race for the chairmanship of the Florida Democrats, a late entrant. Somebody that we've mentioned on the show before, Nikki Fried, former commissioner of agriculture, right? Not secretary, she's a commissioner. And failed gubernatorial candidate who made just a lot of friends during her her primary run, just charming the pants off of everybody during.
You could also argue a failed commissioner of agriculture.
What's her pitch like in the land of?
I'm
lepers?
I'm the only person who's been elected statewide as a Democrat.
So in the land of lepers, I have the most fingers, basically. Yeah. Okay, cool.
I have a thumb left, and the rest of you motherfuckers are stumps. So you come to me. So we could talk about that, or we could also touch on this latest. I believe it's HB 599. I might have to double check myself on that, which is a very troubling new law that is going through that has been introduced by Representative Andrade, and would just to summarily describe it, put our podcast out of business, and would pretty much hinder any media organization in Florida. It would broaden.
It's a job killing program. Literally.
It's a job killing program.
Killing jobs.
Learn to code, baby.
Let's talk about the law, because the election for the Florida Democrats, it's on Saturday. It's gonna be outdated by then. Fuck Nikki Fried. What else can be said? She's a fucking grifter.
So what have you heard about this law? To give a little more context to the listeners, it's talking about $35,000 fines for anybody that dares to say or suggest that somebody might be racist or prejudiced, or I'm still trying to process what this means. I think it seems like
this is a cool tax. They're trying to financially burden anyone who says something cool
for being cool.
Like, you're gross.
Once again,
I am
being punished for presenting new ideas.
Yeah, I'm being punished for being cool.
But Tomas, what have you heard about this? Has anybody been talking about this? Does this stand a chance of getting through the Ron DeSantis legislature?
Of course it stands a chance. They have super majorities.
Yeah.
They don't have any opposition. Do you know what Lauren Book, the Senate minority leader, is doing right now? Did you see the piece of legislation that she introduced?
No.
Introduced a bill that has some good things. As a vegetarian and as an animal lover, I enjoy animal protection measures. So I think the bill has some good things. But what's catching attention is that she wants to institute a ban on dogs sticking their head out of car windows. I mean, what the fuck are we doing?
That's literally like turning boomer memes into legislation.
Yes, hello. They are wanting to give third-degree felonies if you have an undocumented person in your car. They're fucking trying to ban fucking journalists, from calling Ron DeSantis racist. And the Senate minority leader for the Democrats is focused on banning dogs from having a fucking good time in your car. What the fuck?
So it's interior. Okay, fade in. It's the interior of the Book mansion. Ron Book's cell phone rings from his daughter Lauren, telling him, "Dad, I got it. I got it in, and I think we might be able to get it passed." Ron's like, "That's great, sweetie. I'm really proud of you." He closes his cell phone because he still has a flip phone because he's old, and then opens it back up and sends a text and says, "It's done." And on the other side, we see Michael Bloomberg receiving the text message. And he's like, "Yes, it's all coming together." Being the most annoying fucking liberals on the planet and stopping people from doing the most basic shit. We're 90% there.
Why would you do this to the RPOF, the Republican Party of Florida?
If it's 50-50 between him and Trump, they're going to declare that like the gingerbread man is officially like a biological man and not like any other gender.
But yeah, you can't.
And that'll show me you're eating a man cookie.
I didn't want to divert the conversation. I mean,
up yours, woke moralist.
You're eating a boy cookie.
Your cookie is a boy.
Fuck the doggy ban bill, but like, yeah, right. Like, I mean, this is part of the larger effort from who I call the boy in the bubble, Ron DeSantis, to create, like a little snow globe around him, right? Where he can, be a little snowflake with the little snowflakes falling around him and keep away all the mean journalists who are going to ask him mean questions, right? So they've banned them from his press conferences, right? They have these like, conservative news outlets, like Florida's Voice and Florida Standards, that are like paid for by billionaire Republican donors. And,
Florida politics. Sorry.
Yeah, Florida politics, exactly. And now they're just legit being like, you know what? Like, fuck you. If you call us racist, we're going to fucking fine you $35,000. We don't give a shit.
I don't even know how media organizations are supposed to handle this because I read the text of the law. And even if you're a Jim DeFeedy or somebody like that, and you have somebody on who says it, you can be held responsible. You, Jim DeFeedy, and your organization your media outlet can be held responsible too.
Look, this is something we talked about it on the pod with Jason last episode. This is the authoritarian playbook in what's called an illiberal democracy, right? They are testing the institutions. They are pushing against the law. And they know that they have enough judicial appointments and enough court power to like put stress into it, right? And try to create like case law and precedent that supports, their position. So,
how much do you think has to do with the idea that Ron DeSantis probably never has to run in Florida for election ever again? Like, this is probably, I mean, like, the chips fall where they may in a Republican primary for president. That's one thing. And, he probably would easily, or whoever's a Republican is probably going to easily win Florida in 2024. But like, it feels like a lot of this is like, okay, let's see, like what you were saying, like how far we can fucking push this rocket ship.
We don't know actually if he's ever, because he got his second term. He's termed out for governor. He wants to run for president. Hopefully he doesn't make it. I think he's too extreme for the national stage, but who the fuck knows? I mean, America sure has surprises in store for us, right? But even if he doesn't make it, to president, he could easily run for U.S. Senate like Rick Scott did. He could have the same trajectory. The guy is only 44 years old. We're going
to be stuck with him for a long
fucking time unless there's some horrible scandal that, terminates his political career. But, as things stand now, we're stuck with this guy for a long time. And yeah, he has his 2 terms as governor, but you could easily see him in the U.S. Senate in the future.
I was going to say, or like, especially like when we were doing like the Disney stuff, it was like occurring to me that like in his, like the reason he went after Disney was because they came out against like the Don't Say Gay bill, but like, Disney's not the enemy. Disney's the model. Like he wants to turn Florida into MAGA Disney, where like you come in and it's only your fantasies and that like all your dreams come true, but all your dreams are how to make your like college educated niece and nephew as miserable as possible, basically.
And
like
to debate them into coming to visit,
tricking
them.
There's no larger project, like the whole like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like we need a national divorce, like might as well have just waved the white flag. Like it's just like, so you don't have a vision for the future,
right? That's
all you have is whining.
Right.
All you have is crying that you don't like the state of things and you don't have a thrust forward. So it's, well, if you call me racist, I'm taking you to court, and your dog has to be in the car, and I'm burning your recycling so that your town is stinky, and I just don't want a national divorce. I just don't like you anymore.
My wife,
it's like, is this it? And the answer is yes. It's like, wow, I can't believe you guys don't win more elections. What an attractive message you guys have to sell.
What kind of fucking platform? Again, like we talk about the whole like make America Ohio, make America Florida. And I think they realize it. The funniest thing about that was like, based on current trends, wouldn't Georgia in that national divorce probably go to the at least it would be a conversation.
I mean,
that it would be in the blue. It's
debatable.
Column. Like it's at least debatable.
We get joint custody of Georgia.
We get to go to Atlanta for Freaknik.
Yeah. All the children of divorce have to move to Georgia.
Thanks a lot, Mom. So guys, my family spent last night in the emergency room. Everyone is fine. It was just a strained muscle suffered by an overly ambitious 9-year-old gymnast who's not as flexible as she thinks she is. But it had been a while since I visited a hospital, and yeah, sure enough, they're even worse than they were before the pandemic. They fucking suck, man. I don't know if you guys have been to hospitals since the pandemic, but they're disasters. So hours into our visit, I began scrolling through the hospital's Google business listing, seeking solidarity through 1-star reviews, of which there were many. While this collection of plaintive shouts into the uncaring maw of digital space had some similarities like long wait times, insufficient staff, lack of bedside manner, the thing that really stuck out to me were the responses. I don't know if you guys know this, but Google allows companies to respond to reviews. Some companies use this space to make good faith efforts at smoothing over bad experiences. Other companies use it to further engage with the customers. Some small business tyrants use this feature to tell angry customers to go fuck themselves, and this content can actually be genuinely hilarious. But that's not what this hospital did. Rather, each review's response was a slight variation of the same canned reply. And it goes like this.
Dear reviewer, we regret to read of your experience. We take all comments seriously and value your feedback. Healthcare is facing staffing challenges on a local, regional, and national level. Our care teams strive to provide quality care for every child, and we thank you for your trust in us. If you'd like to communicate further,
blah, blah, blah. They give the email and the phone number for the hospital. This is kind of like an indicator of not just professionalization, but corporatization of hospitals and healthcare. This means that there's like a department either employed by the hospital or an agency that's contracted by them to do all this fucking PR work. Back when I was born, back in my day, it cost an uninsured mother like my mom was about $500 to give birth in a hospital. Today, that cost exceeds $14,000, which is more than 700% increase after accounting for inflation. And in Florida, it's even higher. And that got me thinking, it didn't have to be like this, right? Like so many other things that we always talk about, housing, air travel, education, public transportation, healthcare is one of those facets of American life where despite all of the best information that we have telling us that there are better ways to do it, we insist on turning it into an economic blood sport. We let the free market take a crack at solving the problem, and then we're shocked when instead of solving the problem, it just finds a million ways to make a few people rich. We act like this is just the way things are, and sometimes we allude to these nefarious actors like CEOs or executives, all these nameless, faceless parties. I think sometimes we forget that the culpable parties have actual names. They have faces. They have lives and careers before and after gorging themselves on the healthcare system. And every once in a while, if they gorge themselves in just the right way and shake all the right hands, do all the right favors, those people can find themselves in charge of the third largest state in the country. In recent polling, there's a pair of Florida men that we talk about a lot who topped the list of potential candidates for 2024. Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis. Names that we talk about almost every week on this show. We've gone deep on Ron in a lot of episodes. I'm sure we're going to be talking about him more in the future, but not today. Today, we're talking about a different Florida elected official who has arguably done more to shape Florida into its current decrepit composition than either of those guys. If that wasn't enough, this person is also at least partly responsible for the Milton Friedman hellscape that the modern American hospital system has become. He is Florida's current junior senator, its 45th governor, who served 2 terms, Rick Scott. So a couple years before I was born, there was a legal career being born at Southern Methodist University, where young Richard Lynn Scott had just earned his Juris Doctors and passed the Texas bar exam. Scott was actually born in 1952 as Richard Lynn Myers. I don't know if you guys knew that. Rick Scott wasn't originally his name.
Myers?
Yeah, Rick Myers. So he was born as the son of Esther and Gordon William Myers, Gordon was an abusive alcoholic and never actually met his son. After the divorce, yeah, it's kind of like sad. And
All right.
I mean, we like to think that he maybe knew what a piece of shit his son was going to be and pieced out, but some babies have bad vibes. Some babies have bad vibes. It's true.
He was a Rosemary's Baby.
I had a rough childhood too, man. That doesn't fucking.
After the divorce, Esther met a truck driver named Orbaz George Scott, who adopted and raised Rick in North Kansas City, Missouri, along with 4 siblings. A working-class family, the Scotts often struggled to make ends meet. Esther would work seasonal jobs, clerking at J.C. Penney's. After high school, Rick Scott had a brief stint at community college before enlisting in, you guys know it, right? You've seen the hat before, enlisting in the Navy in 1970, where he spent the vast majority of his career. No, I'm just kidding. It was only 29 months. He spent 29 months, a little bit less than 2.5 years in the Navy as a radar man.
Whoa. But that hat surely followed him around.
That hat has gotten mileage, baby. Yeah. You'd be forgiven for thinking he's a career Navy man, considering how he's turned that tattered American Eagle style Navy hat into a political prop that he deploys at every hurricane, toxic spill, natural or man-made disaster. The hat lets us know that Daddy is here, and Daddy will fix everything because Daddy is a strong, responsible military man, not the kind of man who leaves his wife and infant son alone in a cold Missouri winter. Not that kind of daddy. Today, seeing Rick Scott on TV in his Navy hat is an easy shorthand to know that your homeowner's insurance premiums are about to go up. So for his 2.5 years of service, Scott received benefits from the GI Bill that allowed him to attend the University of Missouri, Kansas City, graduating with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration. Ironically, but not surprisingly, Senator Scott would, more than 40 years later, cast his vote against the PACT Act, which was aimed at helping veterans who actually suffered adverse health effects from their service. You know, the people who actually did stuff in the military. After law school, Scott had several business ventures, including his acquisition of a failing donut shop called Flavored Made Donut. He actually turned this donut shop around, apparently. He did a really good job, and now the donut shop was about to go out of business, and See,
look, we are an objective, fair podcast.
Yeah. You know what? If you bring donuts to the people, I'm going to give you credit for that, even if it's 40 years later.
He did Donut Rescue and had the decency not to put it on television.
He also cut his teeth as an attorney at a white shoe law firm in Dallas, but this was all prequel to the advent of the Rick Scott we know today, the Rickening. So let's get to it. If you only know one thing about Rick Scott, it's probably the word fraud. If you know 2 things, it's probably fraud and invoking his Fifth Amendment rights 75 times. And
I thought you say bald.
And also bald. That would be
that would be mine. Yep. He's bald.
And Voldemort.
Yeah, he's got, I mean, this might be really helpful because we have listeners based on our analytics that are outside of Florida and legitimately just listen to our show maybe for Jerry's pretty voice or something, but or just the true crime part of it. But how would you guys?
I think it was Matt.
How would you guys describe, for somebody who hasn't seen this guy? This isn't body shaming, by the way. This is more vibe assessing because this guy is a specific kind of guy.
He looks like a villain in the Fallout video game series. He looks weak. I'm sorry. I remember being in New York during the Tea Party wave, and I was like, I understand the whole Rubio thing where he's a young, I'm running for student council, but statewide, and I've got hope in my eyes and a dream in my heart.
Yeah, Rubio has a high ay bendito quotient, ay bendito, que lindo,
But Rick Scott, I was just how is this guy? And you look up the elections; they were close elections. It's not like this guy was world beating or anything like that. But I was like, this feels like a beatable guy. This feels like a guy who's there's something who's getting up at 6 a.m. to knock on doors for this guy.
Yeah.
I think do you guys remember Blade 2?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was remember there was the Council of Vampires who
in the circular chamber.
Our livelihood depends on our ability to blend in and our discretion.
And then there was this Palpatine-ass vampire who was really old and decrepit. That is Rick Scott. Rick Scott looks like a fucking like high like emperor vampire in the Blade franchise or some shit like that. Like that's his vibe.
Yeah, very fucked vibes. Very, very fucked. Deeply
so.
fucked vibes. These are areas of Rick's bio where I feel like everyone superficially mentions them. Like we mentioned how fucked up he kind of appears to be. We talk about the fraud. We talk about the invoking the Fifth Amendment 75 times. But
and his company was fined $1.7 billion for it.
Exactly. People rarely get deep on this. So I wanted to go deep and actually tell that story of how that happened, because it usually never gets talked about in any more than like 280 characters. On nearly every social media post made by Senator Scott or his team, on almost every social media post that just mentions him, you're going to find some version in the responses of the claim that Rick Scott oversaw the largest Medicare fraud in the history of Medicare, and or that Rick Scott pleaded the Fifth 75 times while being deposed regarding that fraud. So let's get the PolitiFact bullshit out of the way right now. Both of these things are true. It's also true that the hospital company Scott ran, which was called Columbia HCA, paid, as Tomas said, a $1.7 billion penalty for fraud. That was actually several different penalties combined into one. Also true, Scott himself has, to this day, evaded any kind of consequence for this scandal.
I will say, David, he did resign as an executive.
Yeah, they forced him. We'll talk about that in a second. But when we also get into the sweetheart stock deal that he got on the way out the door, I don't know if you could really call that a penalty. The guy walked away with a net worth of almost $300 million in like 1995 money. So I don't know. You know what? Penalize me that way. I'll be glad to go down like that. A lot of Democrats have tried to derail his campaigns by talking about this stuff, and they've had about as much effect as all the reply guys in his mentioned. This motherfucker is the definition of Teflon when it comes to this particular issue, but maybe it's all overblown. What exactly could Columbia HCA have done that was so bad? I don't know if you guys remember minor Twitter figure, Kurt Eichenwald. Did you guys ever follow Kurt Eichenwald on Twitter?
I only know of the embarrassments.
Yes, the embarrassments.
Yeah.
If you know one thing about Kurt Eichenwald, it's hentai tentacle sex.
It's the embarrassments, yes.
Before all of that, way back in the 90s, Kurt was actually a beat reporter for the New York Times. And he covered fraud and mergers and acquisitions. So this is from a Kurt Eichenwald story back in March 1997. Federal investigators widened their search of medical offices around El Paso, Texas on Thursday, seizing documents from doctors affiliated with the local hospitals that are operated by Columbia HCA Healthcare Corp. People familiar with the situation said. The action came in the second day of the government search, which was now said to be completed. On Wednesday, investigators from the FBI, the IRS, and the Department of Health and Human Services served search warrants on a series of facilities in El Paso, as well as on dozens of doctors. Investigators sought a broad range of documents, including financial, billing, and medical records. People who have seen the search warrants said. Moreover, the warrants were served on Columbia's 2 local hospitals, as well as on a number of related sites, including a wound care center, behavioral life center, and other medical operations. So, later on we would find out what the feds were actually looking for, right?
It is one of the biggest criminal investigations of an American corporation ever.
We're executing a search warrant.
In the past few months, hundreds of federal agents have raided at least 70 of Columbia's hospitals and offices in 7 states.
Rick Scott promised explosive growth to shareholders, but to insiders, Rick Scott could be ruthless.
They seem to care more about profits than medicine.
Good old-fashioned fraud, lying for money.
Over the last decade, Columbia has made its stockholders and executives rich.
The company cheated the Medicare program, and they knew what they were doing.
Regularly filing false Medicare reports and overcharging the government.
Charging the government for everything from Kentucky Derby tickets to country club memberships.
False claims submitted to the government year after year over the course of hundreds of hospitals. Their promotions depended on it. Their bonuses depended on it.
For-profit hospital chain HCA, formerly called Columbia HCA, will plead guilty to criminal conduct.
$745 million to settle charges of fraud in Medicare billing.
Rick Scott and 5 other top corporate executives have resigned, and federal investigators told ABC News today that Scott is now considered a prime target of the investigation. Scott,
if you rewind to 1988, Scott and the Dallas area financier Richard Rainwater, who was a big George W. Bush guy. I don't know if you guys, this is way before you guys' time, but he was like one of the early people to put money behind W. They both combined to put $250,000. This guy, Richard Rainwater and Rick Scott, they put their money together, $250,000 towards funding this new company, Columbia Hospital Corporation. It's kind of funny because Rick Scott, I don't know if you guys knew this, he was also a minority owner of the Texas Rangers at the same time that W was an owner of the Rangers, which I did not know until I was researching for this episode.
I did not know either.
They borrowed more than $60 million, and using that money, they acquired 2 struggling hospitals in El Paso, got a third one shut down. Columbia would quickly grow to include 8 hospitals, mostly across Naples down here in Florida and other parts of Southwest Florida. This is a little bit like biz dev speaky, so bear with me, but Rick Scott founded a company in 1987 that was called HCA Acquisition Company, and that goal of that company was right in the name. They wanted to acquire an existing company called Hospital Corporation of America, HCA. That is a Nashville-based hospital and healthcare facilities company that dated back to 1968 and is actually still in business today. So it survived all of this shit and in some iteration, and it's currently still in business. Scott took some of his partners and tried to acquire HCA in 87, but that offer was declined. And then in 94, the business was revived when Columbia Hospital Corporation merged with HCA. And then, of course, who would they name to be the CEO of that company? Our buddy. Rick Scott. So, Daddy didn't want to give me his name. This company that came out of that acquisition was called by the New York Times the single largest for-profit healthcare company in the country at the time. So for-profit healthcare had gotten into Rick's blood, and it would continue to run its course all the way through his political career. Columbia HCA racked up cash. Scott's personal net worth continued to soar. Then came the trouble. The Times broke the news of the federal investigation in March 1997. A week after being raided, Scott signed his last quarterly earnings report as CEO, which Tomas alluded to a moment ago. He was forced out. Slowly, the news began to trickle out that Columbia HCA had, not mistakenly, but systematically overbilled its Medicare patients. And taken advantage of Medicare, the program, to enrich itself. The resulting fines, adding up to $1.7 billion, represent still the largest fraud of its kind to this day, 26 years later. Scott was pressured to resign. By the way, his replacement was his former partner, Thomas Frist Jr., who would go on to become the richest man in Tennessee, he's got to be like 200 years old now. He's worth an estimated $20 billion. So he also holds, this guy Frist, I thought he was interesting. I went down a little rabbit hole with him. He holds the record he conducted the biggest leveraged buyout of all time and the biggest private equity-led IPO of all time. So a real piece of shit.
$20 billion?
$20 billion, yeah.
Man, that's not just the richest man in Tennessee. That's one of the richest men in America.
Yeah. He's like a big deal, and he made the money from a lot of places, but the vast majority of it was being CEO of HCA going forward after post Rick Scott, because that for-profit shit, I don't know if you guys paid attention over the intervening 25 years, but for-profit healthcare, that was a good business. It ended up being a really good business to be in. A great way to make a lot of fucking money. So in the intervening years, Scott has been famously tight-lipped about this entire chapter of his professional career because, again, like, why wouldn't...
Mostly because Florida Democrats have not been...
exactly, holding his feet to the fire.
As an attack point for some fucking reason.
Yeah, he's never actually been held to account for it. And in a 2010 gubernatorial debate, Scott said of the historic fraud, and guys, let me say, from all of the research that I did, and I like went into LexisNexis. This wasn't just some bullshit Google. I was like really reading and watching old. The deposition I watched was like not on YouTube. I had to like go into circuit court archives and shit like that. I could not find this guy being made to talk about this fraud or commenting on this fraud other than this one time?
The HCA, Columbia HCA question, $1.7 billion of fines. Either you knew or you were too distant as a manager. How you qualified to be governor?
Sure. Well, we built a great company. I started with my life savings, my wife and my life savings of $125,000. Over 9 years, we took the company up to 340
We've heard
plus.
that, though. You've said that already. So explain to me how it went so wrong.
Well, you know, one thing you learned, what I focused on was I focused my efforts on making sure patients were taken care of. I reduced the cost of health care, outcomes were better, patient satisfaction. I clearly could have done a better job of hiring more internal and external auditors to have done a better job in making sure the company completely comply with the Medicare regs.
And Tomas, you've actually been at some of these debates and seen some of them. Maybe you can remember a time, and I just couldn't find it. But this is the only thing I could find on him on record ever talking about this $1.7 billion fraud that he oversaw, and it was him standing on stage right next to Alex Sink. That's the only thing that this guy has ever had to say after being governor of Florida for 8 years, for being a senator for the last 4 years and for the next 2. And that's kind of where we come full circle. Because if you look at, I mean, we could talk about all of the various scandals, the way that he's, fucked up our unemployment system to the point where, we don't even know how many people are actually unemployed in the state at any given time, because the metric has been gamed by the system that he created. And Tomas, you could probably talk more about that. And, but like, I think, to me at least, when I look at Rick Scott, he normalized taking for-profit healthcare and just making it a thing where like all bets are off. I can fuck you over and you're fucked, and that's that, and there's no recourse. There's no way to get around it. And yeah, there are going to be people who walk around with $1 billion of money that they got by fucking you over, and there's not shit you can do about it. Do you guys remember the other thing I wanted to bring up as we sort of talk about his like run for governor and how he positioned himself and kind of financed his own campaign to the tune of like tens of millions of dollars? Because like Jared had talked about a moment ago, there aren't people out there knocking on doors for fucking Rick Scott. He is the least inspiring, even among all these ghouls. He's like the least inspiring, engaging, interesting. He has to self-fund all this stuff, because who the fuck is going to go out there and put an effort forth for this guy?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because Rick Scott also has always had an adversarial relationship to the Republican Party of Florida apparatus, and he's always ran as an outsider, right? So
that's really interesting. That's true, yeah.
He literally has built his own like parallel machinery, right? Like he has his own consultants, he has his own field operation, he has his own people, and he operates like completely outside of the Republican Party of Florida. And it actually, it showed when he governed, because unlike DeSantis, who has a really cozy relationship with the Republicans in the legislature and the RPOF, and they give him everything he wants, they have like a symbiotic relationship. Rick Scott had a very actually adversarial relationship with the Florida legislature, and a lot of his projects didn't go through. He actually vetoed projects. So there was a lot of infighting in there. And even, to this day, right? I mean, Rick Scott is somebody that doesn't get along with Ron DeSantis, right? They've butted heads a bunch of times. In fact, today, even, Ron DeSantis proposed stripping in-state tuition for undocumented students, which is basically the ability for them to pay as a U.S. citizen student to go to the university instead of as a foreign student, right? Which is much more expensive. And Rick Scott, who actually signed in-state tuition in 2014, that was a good thing he did, came out and said, I think this is wrong. I think we shouldn't do this, and obviously he's not doing this out of the goodness of his heart. He's doing it to take a shot at Ron DeSantis. So, it's interesting that you say that, because he truly does have an apparatus that he's funded through this like dirty blood money.
Yeah, he's a CEO. Sorry, go ahead, Jared.
To your earlier point, Tomas, about the opposition fumbling the bag as if it's their job, the only other tidbit of news I remember from being up in New York about Rick Scott was when they were doing the ACA, that he was adamant that the state was going to be refusing any money from the federal government to pay for Medicaid expansion, and especially since the site, the marketplace was going live in 2014. I remember, my dumb ass thinking like, oh, this is going to activate a lot of people who could benefit from these programs if he's just
wait till they see
free money.
Just wait till they see the spreadsheets. Just wait till they see the bronze plans.
I was like, this is like a gimme for the Florida Democratic Party.
And to this day, we haven't gotten Medicaid expansion in the state of Florida. It's something that to this day, the Florida Democrats have not capitalized on.
Well, one of the things that you said, Tomas, is funny because two things I came across with respect to Rick Scott's sort of oppositional posture with the party and with the more like established pieces of the party, that when in 2018 Ron DeSantis took over for him, apparently what I read in this researching that I didn't know is that the DeSantis team treated the transition almost as if it was a different party that they were taking over for, that they cleaned house, they got rid of positions that you normally would keep as holdovers, like very minor administrative, and there was a lot of bad blood and like toxicity between and it continues to this day, because the other thing that I read is that there is no formal communication between Senator Rick Scott and the governor's office. There's they will communicate when they need to, but there isn't that coordination that there normally would be between a senator and a governor of the same party in the same state.
Yeah, and Rick Scott, he's somebody, he's aligned with the Trump wing, right? He's a Trump guy.
Yeah.
And the person who ran Ron DeSantis's 2018 campaign, who really actually turned around, because that campaign was a mess until this person came in, is an operative, a GOP operative called Susie Wiles, who was involved with the Trump campaign and a bunch of different RPOF campaigns. That's the Republican Party of Florida. Just want to reiterate that in the state. And she's close to the Trump wing, the Rick Scotts. And after the Ron DeSantis election, she was kind of purged out of, the Florida operation because of her closeness, again, with Trump and Rick Scott and that whole wing of the party. And she's been protected and sort of brought back, into the fold by the Trump machine. But yeah, she's someone that got purged, right? So there's like real bad blood between Rick Scott and Ron DeSantis, and as the battle, right, for the GOP presidential nomination heats up, right, and we see Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump actually go head to head, if they do indeed run against each other, you're gonna see Rick Scott taking more shots, because he's gonna be used as a proxy, to attack DeSantis. And that's why, for in the more astute or more in the weeds political observers that listen to this, Rick Scott has been taking shots at Mitch McConnell pretty much ever since he became a U.S. senator. Yep. In fact, he ran against him, for U.S. Senate leader, and his position as the National Republican Senatorial Committee chair, he's basically used it as a platform to undermine Mitch McConnell. And that's basically, again, he's doing that as a proxy for Donald Trump, who hates Mitch McConnell, right? So
one thing I didn't have time to get into in my research, and maybe you two just know it off the dome, but like I as NRSC chair, like he lost a bunch of money, didn't he? That was like his most recent controversy, is that did he lose the money in terms of like spending it badly, or did it just go bye Pentagon style?
In fact, he managed money so poorly that the Senate Leadership Fund, which is a PAC associated with Mitch McConnell, had to inject $28 million into the state of Ohio on behalf of J.D. Vance, which they were expecting JD and the NRSC to be able to not coast to victory, but be able to handle their own stuff. And McConnell saw, I guess, the lay of the land and said, if JD's going to put up the numbers we want, it's going to take a massive infusion of cash.
Oh, does this have anything to do with when like Peter Thiel was like castigating Mitch McConnell about like fucking up left and right? Was that his money that he had to put in there?
Thiel was trying to get behind JD, Blake Master. I mean, he had like Senate candidates that
the mutant caucus.
Yes, basically, yes. The freaks.
It wasn't just like the misappropriation of money, right, and the embezzlement of money. It's just also the fact that like people were complaining that like the money that was like being spent like transparently was being spent stupidly, right?
Yeah.
Like Rick Scott spent a lot of money last cycle on himself, right? Basically promoting himself, running digital and TV ads of himself, promoting his stupid Rescue America plan or whatever it's fucking called that calls for sunsetting Medicare and Social Security every 5 years, putting it in the chopping block, all federal programs, which is insane and stupid in its own right. But people were saying, like Republicans who, it's a good point. They're saying, why is Rick Scott spending ads on himself, promoting himself, when he's not up for
running?
He's not up for election, and we have a very competitive, field of candidates that are under threat.
Joining me now is the man in charge of trying to win back the Senate for Republicans. Florida Senator Rick Scott is the chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Good to see you in the studio.
I like the words "when" we get a majority.
Well, we'll see what happens on Tuesday night.
First off, what I tried to do when I got this job a couple of years ago is make sure we work with the NRCC, the House, and with the RNC, because everybody working together would do better. Right now, I think we're at 52 plus. Mehmet's going to win. Herschel's going to win. Adam Laxalt's going to win. I think we have a real good shot out in Arizona, a real good shot in New Hampshire. We're basically tied in Washington. So it just depends on who votes.
So you're predicting control?
Absolutely. We're going to get a
or
majority.
whenever we get the results of Pennsylvania. God knows when that's going to be.
I know, but I think we're going to get 52 plus. Early voting's heading our way.
Yeah. And under his tenure, the reality is that in a map that was very unfavorable to Democrats in a midterm election of the incumbent party, Democrats not only retained the Senate,
picked up seats.
They picked up seats.
When he spent money, they spent $40 million by July. He was blowing through money in the summertime, and so that there would be none left in the fall. To put that in perspective, the Democratic Senate committee had spent $2 million by July because they were going to make their big push closer to the election when people would be paying attention.
Yeah. And one thing that Scott loves to talk about, and he spent ad money on this, but he does it every single cycle. He loves to talk about term limits.
Yeah.
Because it's like a very populist thing, right? Like Washington,
it's an everyman thing. Yeah, sticking it to the dirty politicians. Yeah,
that to me is it's a dumb guy thing though, because it's like you're gonna make the puppet masters play with new puppets every 4 to 8 years or whatever it is. Like they have to go out and find a new one.
We don't have to get on a debate about term limits right now, but my point is like, bro, like what the fuck are you talking about? Like you were just governor of Florida twice. And then you went ahead to
the Senate.
Yeah. Like you love sucking at the tit of the taxpayer. You know what I mean? Like
the thing that you both touched on that is a defining characteristic of Rick Scott's public service for the last 12 years is harebrained economic plans. And I think if you go back, you can even look at, I don't know how many, if either of you or any of you out there remember the 777 plan. Do you guys remember this from his very first run? So it was his promise that, quote, in total, Florida's economy.
I remember the 999. I think that was Herman Cain.
That was Herman Cain. That was a baller ass plan. No, this was the 777. In total, Florida's economy will gain an additional 700,000 jobs. This is, what he's saying will happen. Mm-hmm. This is what 2010 Rick Scott is saying will happen if you elect him governor. 74 billion in state GDP. 41 billion in higher personal income, 1 billion in total state tax revenues as direct result of increased economic growth. The sevens are, you gotta like really squint to be able to see the sevens. But here's the thing. I'm looking at the PolitiFact article on this. I don't recommend anybody do that. But I'm looking at the PolitiFact in a sort of the PolitiFact, promises kept meter. They're saying that he kept this promise. And I'm doing it in kind of a meta way because it's really helpful to realize that these fact-checking websites are bullshit. When you realize PolitiFact, when they decided to say that he kept that promise, they never went back and reappraised it when we all learned at the beginning of COVID that, and I alluded to this a little bit ago, we in Florida have no fucking idea of how many people are actually unemployed or how many jobs are actually being created, because the state unemployment system is so fucked. And the state unemployment system that specifically Governor Scott created, I think, Tomas, what was it, 2013 or something like that? It was, he made it, and he like built the website that for some fucking reason has banker's hours. Like a website is only open from 9 to 5. And so many people would go to this website and continue to go to this website and realize like it's impossible for me to fucking sign up for to get my unemployment benefits that I paid into, that I deserve, that I have invested in. And so to say that he delivered 700,000 jobs, you just pull any number out of your ass. Like, who fucking cares? This is back like the one thing that he started that I don't think anybody had done before was all of these little junket trips to hinterlands across Florida where he would be announcing, 25 new positions at a Chick-fil-A or some shit like that. And Ron DeSantis has like completely weaponized that whole thing now. And I just think it's like, that's the 777 plan is just one example of it. But this more recent, I don't even know, is there an official title for this bullshit plan that he has where he wants to make the Senate or Congress re-up every piece of legislation every 6 years?
Rescue America plan.
It's a 12-point plan to rescue America.
Thank God someone's going to do it. Rescue fucking America. So I don't know, Tomas, do you have memories of 2018? Like, that was one of the most ridiculous elections that I've ever followed, when he beat barely sentient, barely awake Bill Nelson, who didn't bother running for Senate in fucking Florida, didn't bother to make a website in Spanish or do fucking anything in Spanish.
I say we send Nelson back into space. That's just me.
Well, they kind of did.
They kind of did, yeah. He's like running NASA, right, or whatever. Yeah. But isn't NASA these days just like one room where they just write checks to SpaceX? Like that's all they do.
Yeah.
NASA got cucked by the private sector, bro.
What the fuck, man? That's fucked.
They have a giant whiteboard with just the word Mars written on it, and every day someone circles it and then points at it, and then everyone nods and gets to their computer.
We used to tragically blow things up in this country. What happened?
I know. Now we do it on purpose.
I don't know, T. Do you remember 2018 and the whole what was going on behind the scenes? Whatever you can remember or share, if you were that involved, like with the flailing Bill Nelson campaign and like the campaign, the election that ended up giving us 6 more years of Rick Scott.
I mean, I've never worked for a Democratic Party campaign except for the Bernie Sanders campaign, and you could argue he's a independent senator.
Hell yeah.
I've worked for nonprofits on what's called the independent expenditure side, which is basically like political committees that support candidates. And I was working for a nonprofit that was supporting the Andrew Gillum, Bill Nelson, top a ticket and the down ballot Democratic candidates. And Bill Nelson lost by about 10,000 votes. In a very, very close election, that because it was less than half of a percentage point, it went to not just a machine vote recount, but a hand ballot vote recount, right?
Yeah.
And Rick Scott, I remember, was basically through a fucking temper tantrum, was accusing Democrats of trying to steal the election, trying to find votes, trying to manufacture votes. Basically it was like the Trump of 2020, but in 2018, but he won, right? And making up a 10,000 vote deficit, even though it's close, very difficult to do so, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it was a really, really wild time.
I just remember hearing story after story, you would get dispatches from random places. I brought it up on this podcast before, but then Governor Scott letting people in heavily conservative Bay County vote via email. Yeah. And they were hit by a hurricane, but
it doesn't matter. That's not allowed.
Yeah,
That's
imagine doing that in what if that was Broward?
Broward County.
Yeah, and then 2018 was also the year of the much consternation over whether or not you could open early voting sites on Miami-Dade College campus and a bunch of other places across the state, which would, obviously empower blue turnout, presumably, And there was a bunch of little things like that, and it just.
I'll tell you a story. We got reports of basically vote by mail ballots that were sitting at a U.S. Postal Service, processing center in
Opelika, right?
Yep, in the Opelika.
I remember this.
U.S. Postal Processing Center, and I went there actually with Andrea Mercado, who's the executive director of an organization called Florida Rising, and we basically went there. We demanded to see what was going on. We were there. We talked to a few people, and it turned out that they had a couple of boxes of just vote by mail ballots that we just never made it.
And was it?
And that was sent before the election, right?
Right. They were sent in time. Yeah.
Yeah. So just shit like that happened a lot, right?
Am I crazy, or did I hallucinate also another story in that year where that might have been Gillum? There was like a weird pagination error on some of the Broward ballots, where it was incredibly easy to miss the election, to miss that one selection basically. And this might have been Gillum DeSantis, but I think it was Nelson Scott. I have to look it back up. But there was another irregularity where it was here's whatever part of Broward got that ballot. Basically, there was something like 25,000 voters who just didn't vote for that race. And it was because very clearly it was kind of shoved off. It was one of those long columns that you didn't know where it ended and where it began, if memory serves. Am I crazy, or do you guys remember anything like that?
There was that ballot design that played into it.
Yeah, and then a bunch of people didn't even cast a vote for that particular race. So I feel like, Jerry, you're sort of our national politics correspondent.
Okay.
Do you
just like in real life, I find out what my job is the day of.
Would you be concerned? Would you be concerned if you were helping Rick Scott for his 2024 election, whether he runs for president or whether he runs for Senate or whether he pulls a Rubio in 16 and does both? Would you be concerned that this is the first time Rick Scott, he of the barely inching by every single time he wins on the strength of his own millions and millions of dollars, would you be concerned that this is the first non-midterm election he's ever run in his life?
If he runs for Senate, I think he'll be fine because
of Florida.
We'll touch on it in a later episode, but we had, moths to a flame, hundreds of thousands of freedom freaks basically remake the state in the span of 3 years. So I think he's firmly ensconced in power for as long as he wants it in the Senate. Should he raise his sights and see the whirring Trump buzzsaw and say, I think I'd like to walk into that today, and decide he has now national ambitions and is going to have to get through a cafeteria fight with someone on sheer force of personality? I could not tell you if Rick Scott has ever said a single sentence that wasn't written out for him beforehand. And so I do not think that he is going to be able to get by on the cut of his jib. He seems jibless to me.
Yeah.
So I think if he sticks to the Senate, he's got it's a nice cushy job. You just do what you
can do it. Look at Barbara. You can do it for 100 years.
You don't go to the Mediterranean 3 months before you're going to have the most winnable midterm in generations, and then completely miss the ball. You just don't do that. You do keep your head down, hustle.
Oh, I forgot about that. The yacht, right in October.
Oh, how could I forget the yacht? Beyond, of course. And listen, he's got an anniversary. I understand that. If you're married, you say, "Listen, honey, I'm responsible for trying to rescue America. Do you want to go to Greece?" And you just do that. Sometimes it's just you follow your heart, and it's nice to see him, living in the moment and living his truth and living his dream. However, if you're going to run for president, you're going to have to be able to call people a lot of names. You're going to have to be able to go to Rick Scott and say, what is it, Meatball Ron? You're going to have to top Meatball Ron. You're going to have to come up with your own thing that's better than Meatball Ron. I just don't see that.
Really good.
Is there a path for somebody who cuts this non-controversial, relatively non-controversial, sort of throwback conservative John Boehner, George W. Bush style guy to come in and be like, "Hey, I'm the grown up here,"
The appeal to that is firmly from the press. The people who like Biden because he makes the news not stressful to write. They don't have to look at Twitter and freak out every time they have to cover the Biden administration. Like this whole thing with go ahead.
No, there's a constituency of voters that want boring, norms respecting politics. They will vote for Biden.
Yeah,
they're not.
Yes, they're not going to vote for Nikki Haley. They're not going to vote for Mike Pompeo or Mike Pence or whoever else. They like Trump because he's Trump.
Yeah.
If he switched his positions on healthcare to those of Bernie Sanders, they would also switch their positions on healthcare to that of Bernie Sanders because he's doing it. And all that matters is what he's doing.
I read this report that apparently Trump has gone woke and won't call Meatball Ron because it's offensive to Italians. And
true.
See, I don't think that that's what's going on. I read the same thing that you read. And
so disappointed. I hope it's not true.
I don't think that that's what's going on. I think he's doing something that is actually a 12D chess Brain Master Galaxy.
He's negging.
He's reinforcing the thing.
Yes, by saying he won't do it.
By saying I refuse to say this thing and saying the thing. And
the last thing I want you to do is get in Meatball. I won't say it.
I'm not going to say it.
But don't get in his replies, folks. Do not get in those replies. I don't want to see it. I would be very upset if I saw it, folks.
We've most recently seen this strategy done to pretty solid effect by Kanye last year when he was like, I'm not going to say who my doctor was.
Right. But then he said
Wait. Okay, so let's play a game. Let's play a little game. What would be Trump's nickname for Rick Scott if he ran?
Rick Skull. I think you would call him Rick Skull.
No,
that's not good. That's not good enough.
Maybe that's just me. I just want to call him Rick Skull.
I think it'd be like Creepy Scott or something.
Creepy Rick.
Creepy Rick Scott.
Creepy Scott. Creepy Rick.
Yeah.
No, wait. He might just pull like a variation of the Tim Apple move and start calling him Scott Rick. Just flipping his name around,
or Rick Florida.
Yeah, that would backfire on him because that's a fucking cool name, Rick Florida.
We've got Hissin Rick is a little snake from Florida. We love our snakes in Florida, folks.
We love the snakes.
Little Hissin Rick is throwing a hissy fit over Social Security and Medicare at Biden's State of the Union. He's saying he wants to cut it, folks. I remember I said it, but I also said that's not what I said. And that's what you got to do is say it and then say I didn't say that.
But that's
Hissin Rick, he just says, "Oh, what? Oh no, not me. I'm not gonna. No. I have a special provision. Is no Social Security, no Medicare, no Navy, no military, no veterans benefits." By the time he's done, he's not going to have a plan left, folks. He's not going to have anything left. He's got so many exceptions to the plan, you basically don't have a plan. Why is Hissin Rick even coming in here with any plan at all?
Hey, Rick, I rescued America once already. I did it. It's done. We rescued it.
We need to incorporate that into the name of the episode, Hissin Rick.
Listen, Hissin Rick's going to slither all the way back to the Mediterranean where it belongs.
What
we love our Florida snakes, folks.
What are the odds, though, knowing that Donald Trump has already won the presidency once with a like corpse adjacent translucent white dude next to him as vice president? What are the odds that he does that again? Because in the one, that I mean, they've been pretty tight. I mean, they've
I think he knows that that Rick Scott is dead weight politically at the national level. I think he knows that. He picked Mike Pence because he knew the evangelicals did not trust this like Queenie Manhattan guy to be a church going, they were like, this guy's not cut from our cloth.
And then how funny that they stuck with him.
Right. Well, that's the thing. He gave them their judges, and that's all they wanted was their judges. Now, not only are they cut from his cloth, he is the cloth. So it's almost like I might as well not even have a vice president. I might as well just pick myself.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The ultimate move that Trump can do to cuck Ron is to pick Janet Nunes.
The lieutenant governor currently, And what is she going to do? Say no? Like, I mean, you're fucking crazy? Yeah. Or no, actually, the ultimate cuck move would be Casey DeSantis. Pick her. That would be. She would probably be a better vice president, if I'm being honest. Like, she would probably be better at doing the job than Nunes.
The only thing I had, I had it written out, but I kind of just like slid by it. Trump, got very mad, obviously, and was like, under no circumstances should anyone be cutting Social Security, Medicare. Right before COVID, he was announced, like they asked him on both Fox and CNBC, hey, the deficit's ballooned under your administration. Are you going to be doing any entitlement cuts to like lower the deficit? He was like, oh yeah. And then just said, oh, I didn't say that afterwards. Like, cause he knows it's unpopular. And he knows the only reason he's getting asked that question is because Mitch McConnell wants it. And he doesn't want to have to deal with Mitch McConnell's unpopular positions. Cause remember, he's only in this for, riding the Clemson football team over for hamburgers. Like, that's what you think. Yeah, you think he wants to cut Social Security? No, like I don't think he cares. You think he cares?
The Las Vegas Aces, folks, the champions, WNBA. Women are so tall. That's a superpower that he has, that only he has.
Yeah,
though. Like nobody else can pull. Like I've seen on social media, in right wing spaces where
Bill Clinton has it.
Yeah, I guess so. That's true.
Yeah.
Like where it just doesn't matter what they say.
Where it's just like, God, you should be in jail, but you're just you're just still here.
The one issue that I keep seeing on social media is where they you see the right wingers kind of, or just MAGA, generic MAGA people excusing him for being pro-vaccine, which is hilarious because Donald Trump, if you listen, he's very pro-vaccine. He will go out there and say, like, you should get the vaccine. You should get the fucking, you should get the booster. And, like, that's the one litmus test where you can see that they're, like, willing to forgive him for that. And they're like, I wish he would be better on vaccines, but you know what? He's still the main man. He's still the guy.
So I have a lot of relatives, and I had to hear a lot of their opinions about COVID that were upsetting to me. But also, I see an opening for someone like a DeSantis on not just the vaccines, but also Fauci, because Trump was having a lot of.
Why didn't you fire him? Why didn't you
fire him? You had all these rallies saying you wanted to. You didn't have any rallies before you fired Bannon. You just fired him. You didn't have any rallies when we got rid of Omarosa. You just fired her. John Bolton, you just fired. All these people you just fired. Fauci's the one guy that your whole base thinks was committing the crime of the century with Bill Gates and Xi Jinping to put microchips into people's bloodstream. And you're telling me you just let him walk all over you with his master plan in broad daylight, so obvious that our most illustrious DIY Facebook documentarians could see it, but the president of the United States can't, and it's happening right under his nose. You should have stopped him, Mr. President. He worked for you. You should have apprehended him. You should have had him arrested. That's good. I mean, someone's going to ask him about it on that stage.
Yeah.
You said you wanted to fire him. Why didn't you? He's like, well, I needed a scapegoat. I needed a guy to blame. What am I going to do? Get rid of him?
That's another superpower he has. That's another superpower he has where he could just say that. He could just say, like, well, yeah, I didn't mean that. I was lying because I wanted to win. And people will be like, fuck yeah.
Listen, they say, keep your enemies close. They're closer than your friends. That's something they say. And I wanted to keep an eye on this guy.
People will be like, yes, that's right. Like, what he said is right. That's Sun Tzu,
genius.
I think.
That's genius. I think this also now.
Sorry, T, what were you going to say?
No, I just agree. I don't think his base is going to give a shit at the end of the day.
Not at all.
I just think he's funny as hell.
They'll try to land some punches, but that's it. They're going to try, and I think fail.
So I guess maybe I'm concocting this too much, like, because the rumors of Scott, again, our main subject for this episode, are rumors of Rick Scott running for president. They existed in 2022, but 2020 as well, not 2022. But they like nothing came from them, and now like similar quiet rumblings. It almost feels like test balloons, right? We talk about test balloons where it's like, oh, how will people react to this? And
Chinese spy balloons.
And it feels, or the poor like Rotarians that are like getting their school project balloons shot down.
Yeah, fucking F-22 Raptors
shooting $30 million missiles at.
Yeah.
But I wonder, like, sticking with the Rick Scott, like, how long is he in our life question? Like, how what can we expect? Where does the Florida primary, do we know yet where it lands in the calendar in 2024? Is that set in stone, or?
Yeah, it's usually around like the 3rd or 4th week of August.
Okay,
like,
so very late. It'll be in the same very late position.
Yeah, we have one of the latest primaries in the country.
Yeah, I just had heard rumors about the dates being in flux, but I didn't know if that affected Florida. I think that had more to do with like Iowa being terrible at doing primaries, but
I think your best bet of getting rid of him is the GOP, whether it's Trump. We'll just say it's Trump. Gives Rick Scott like a cabinet position, and then he's out of there. Like that's I think the easiest glide like to getting him out in the short term.
Yeah, and now Florida is one of those states where the calculus for that is like, oh well, we can very easily get somebody else.
Yeah, just make him like secretary of scams, and he's happy.
We've talked about this shit before, though, Tomasi. We were like talking about it a second ago, where it's like all this money, a guy with this kind of money, like why not just fucking enjoy life, man? I get that, like Trump is crazy rich, but he's like addicted to the limelight. This guy clearly is not. Why not just be on that fucking yacht in Sardinia or fucking wherever?
Also, like when you have like if I had that much money, like I would be like funding like senators. You know, like you're not the senator then. You're the guy that's like funding.
You're
like,
Peter Thiel.
Yeah, you're like the guy that's like the senators calling for. It's just pathetic. I mean, the thing is that like, look, I work in politics, right? And I work a lot with politicians and people that want to be politicians. And I'm not saying all of them, because there's generally like some good people in the process, in the system. But like most of these people are like broken. Like they're just people that just are broken inside. They have like a deep hole inside of them that they need to fill by running for office, having a title, and having the validation of that title when they interact with people.
All these people turned out for me. I must be a good person.
I'm the star,
Rick Scott doesn't just need the validation of just like being in control and funding and like, exercising power. He needs the adoration of being, I am a U.S. senator. Yeah. Like he's a broken man.
Yeah, and I feel like it must be very frustrating, because I can't imagine there being a lot of spaces left for him to go and get that adoration, because it feels like the space on his side of the spectrum is taken up by like the spectrum for him. The spectrum for any conservative in Florida is like you can be Donald Trump or you can be Ron DeSantis, and you can be something in the middle. But you get it's hard to be Rick Scott.
David, that's the saddest part about these people, is that they're so broken that Rick Scott could become a U.S. president, and it's like that still will not fill that hole, because that's not like something that will self-actualize you. That's not going to fill the emotional need that you have. Yeah. Like what's going to fill that need is like therapy and like self-work and like self-actual. I'm not trying to be corny or cliche, but like you need to do some real like investment in yourself to be able to overcome that. Like just becoming a U.S. senator or a U.S. president and just seeking the validation of just like, like superficial like interactions with masses of people, that's not going to make you happy. So Rick Scott is a man that ultimately will never be happy. And that's why he's so angry all the time, right? Like, I mean, you can tell the way he like talks to the media and he talks about his political opponents.
Yeah.
He's like an angry, nasty, bitter guy.
He does hiss. He literally hisses. He's like, yeah.
He's
Hissy Rick. He's throwing another hissy fit.
He's a broken guy. He's a fucking broken human being. And the sad part is he's a broken human being with a lot of money and who has become all of our problems.
Yeah.
Because his trauma is affecting all of us.
Do the two of you remember his foot in the door to politics? This was before he announced that he was going to run for governor. It was right before. It was a year before.
No, this would have been in 2009?
2009. He founded an organization that was his first, again, this was his first foray into politics.
Right.
I believe it was called the Conservatives for Responsible Healthcare.
Oh,
and
boy.
I
remember this.
This was the rejoinder to the loud voices, the closest that this country ever came to getting something resembling single-payer healthcare at that moment. This was a rejoinder to that. This was a pushback, right? Because, and here comes this wildly succesul, and nobody bothered to scratch the surface on that, wildly successful healthcare executive. Because he did go on to run a whole bunch. We kind of glossed over it, but he ran like a weird like snake oil company after that. Where like,
wildly successful healthcare executive is something that only exists in the United States.
Right.
That's something I need listeners to know. That exists because of how fucked up our system of healthcare is in the first place.
Right. If there's money pooling at the top like that, the system's bad. But again, this is going into our DSA bag, but
it's not going into healthcare by definition. It's going into his pockets. Anyway, sorry.
But I just wonder if those are the kind of things that a person like him, who has all the fucking money in the world, dedicates and gets like fulfilled. I guess. How does a lizard feel fulfilled?
What makes a man like him happy?
Yeah, like
attention, I guess.
Yeah,
attention.
Like what Tomas said. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he has money. It can't be money. If you celebrities, they turn to drugs, and then they turn to rehab, and then they turn to redemption tours and comeback albums and comeback movies.
Do you think that he's just like sitting in a mansion with like a needle that's filled with like long hospital wait times? Like it feels like I don't know what makes this guy fucking happy.
Because he's like,
I don't think he knows, David. Like, like clearly,
like he's here to be here. He's like, well, I'm a senator, so I'm going to be the senator now. But does it make him happy? I doubt it. Again, I don't know him. I don't want to.
I mean, like, okay, here is the proof that he's not happy being a U.S. senator. Again, this is a guy that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He could be happy with his hundreds of millions of dollars. He could be happy being a GOP mega donor. Calling the shots. He decides to run for governor. After being governor, you're a twice elected governor. You could be like a stateman in the GOP party as a like GOP mega donor, multimillionaire, twice elected governor. You run for U.S. Senate. You know what I mean? One of the most like after being an executive of a state, and then you're a U.S. senator, and you run to be the National Republican Senatorial Committee chair.
That's such bitch work.
It's just like. He's obsessed with being relevant, right? He's obsessed with the title. He's obsessed with power. He's obsessed with validation. He's obsessed with being the biggest dick in the room. It's so transparent. You know what I mean?
But I don't think he's wrong. Like the two people that come to mind in conservative land who went the opposite route were like Jim DeMint and Sarah Palin, who literally were like, I'm abandoning my post to like cash in basically either at like Heritage Foundation or on like TLC as a reality show or whatever else.
I've got one more analog there, Jer. Like you just kind of jogged my mind a bit, but Jim Justice in West Virginia, who remember he abandoned his post in a weird way. He switched parties.
Right.
Where I believe he was a Republican, he changed to Democrat
and then back to
Republican. Yeah. So like and again, insanely rich guy, billionaire.
But he's in office. He's in office. He's the governor of a state. He gets when something happens, I remember they what was it they said, like, when they showed me the COVID data, I peed in my pants or something like that. Like, literally a quote, literally like in the AP. Like, I'm not exaggerating. You can Google Jim Justice pee pants, it'll come up. But he's in office. He knows that, like, when stuff happens, journalists need to talk to politicians who are going to respond to what's happening, and that means they're going to call me, and that means my phone will always be ringing. I don't know that Sarah Palin's phone or Jim DeMint's phone, I don't know that they ring as much as when they were in office. I don't think anyone's calling them up to see what they think about things. So I do think Tomas is right. The whole point of running is for the relevance, is to stay relevant and keep your phone hot. You could sell out, but he doesn't need to sell because he already has money.
I don't know. Have you guys seen the pictures of Sarah Palin lately? She's looking pretty hot. I mean,
yeah, but no one's calling her. No one's calling her to say, "Hey, what do you think of the balloon?" Like, you know, can you imagine? Can you imagine in the 2010s if there was a spy balloon flying over Alaska and she was still the governor? Can you imagine? She'd be so happy.
She'd be loving
like,
it.
I'm gonna be eating tonight. Like, those are awesome.
Podcasters across the world would have
now.
Hours
you know, she
of
quit.
content.
Did a reality show. Did the Dancing with the Stars with what was the daughters? I forget who it was, but you know, she cashed out.
But she was supposed to be. She was supposed to be a media By the way, Sarah Palin, it bears noting, does have a Miami connection, a Florida connection, because she fucked Glenn Rice when she was in college. But
hey, I did too.
But like, she was supposed to be like a big national. She was supposed to be like a Laura Ingraham, right? Like, that's what they had groomed her for in like 2016 or 2015 or something. Like they and then they realized she just constitutionally wasn't capable of being that interesting. Or
I'm saying, I think Tomas is onto something when he says you run for office to stay relevant, and you stay in office to stay relevant. Like, you know, if he left office, no one would care about him anymore, and if you want to be cared about, that's why you stay.
But I disagree with that, though. I mean, it would, but like Rick Scott is worth millions of dollars, so his phone, like, he would still be relevant in like political power circles. But he wouldn't have like the media attention.
Right, exactly, which is what he wants.
He would have to be a behind-the-scenes guy. Yeah.
Right.
That's stupid. Like, that's not real power. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just
it's dumb
like
power.
Right.
It's dumb guy power. I have to tell you guys this story because I brought up Jim Justice. Have either of you ever been to West Virginia or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been there.
Have you ever been to Greenbrier?
No.
Okay, so Greenbrier on the southern end of West Virginia, the southern, like, you know, little nodule that it has. I went there once for a client visit for a business trip, and you actually have to land in Norfolk, Virginia, and I'm sorry, Roanoke. You have to land in Roanoke and drive there like 3 hours. There's like no airport anywhere near there, and it's the only like luxury resort in West Virginia. It's owned by Jim Justice. And when you get there, it is like Epstein Island levels of weird and creepy. It like the pastel colorings, the interiors, the dead eyes on all of the employees, and like the slack jaws. It's the weirdest fucking place to be. But the one thing I just always loved.
Are you saying this from experience?
Yes, I went there. I stayed 2 nights there. It was horrifying. and the child sacrifice rituals, like not even very good. But we pull up to the front where the valet is, and there's one prominent parking space that's basically double parking spaces, and it was empty at this time. But it's like literally you step out of the car and you walk straight in, right? It's like the prime number one parking space. And it has a big sign on it that just says Big Jim. And it's his parking space. And I was like, is that his? And I had to Google, and I was like, Jim, the fucking governor owns. This is like out of, again, like a fucking Elmore Leonard novel or some shit. This is like, I did not know that that's actually the way. I mean, and Rick Scott could just be that guy. He could be that guy. He could just, you know, be rich with own, like the richest guy. If he hadn't fucked up HCA, he could be the richest guy in Nashville, right? No, the richest guy in Tennessee right now. But instead, it was the other guy. And it's like, what have you fucking done, man? What have you done? Made everyone's life shittier.
Well, I'll tell you what, he'll definitely won't be U.S. president. That's
No.
That's a bet I'm willing to make.
That's all for this episode of Why Are We Like This? Be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts for more episodes or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Visit us at wawlt.com. Follow us on Twitter at Wolt Show and on TikTok at Wolt Show. You can also email us at wolt@allpointswest.net. Until next time, this was Why Are We Like This? Wolt Mafia Rising.